Thank you. So you skipped the last part of the title, which is the most important one. What really matters is your business. That's fine. So this will not be a technical presentation. It will be a very cynical talk of what I see out there and how people forget that they do what they do because there are some business needs behind it. And those business needs usually get forgotten. So I could title this the do's and don'ts of cloud building. And then obviously the question you should ask yourself is, why is this guy telling me about clouds? Well, first, I've been in this industry long enough to see numerous things emerge as the best solution to everything and then fail miserably. And OpenFlow and overlay networks and SDN and things like that are nothing new. I mean, just speaking about SDN, in 1993, I was programming my Cisco access servers from a Perl script, and I automatically provisioned users that were dialing into my access servers as the internet service provider. So by every definition, we had SDN in 1993. Obviously, no one was calling that SDN. It was just business as usual because the hype hasn't been invented yet. And of course, everyone would call what we had in those days orchestration system because that's the fancy name for, you know, service provisioning. But we didn't. We just provisioned users. And the other thing, everyone started talking about clouds in 2000 and something, and we were actually offering cloud services since 2001, only we didn't call them cloud services, they were remote labs. But if you take the definition of cloud service, where you can get the service on demand and pay with a credit card and have it instantly available, we sort of fulfilled all the requirements. Only we didn't know we were offering the cloud services because the buzzword hasn't been invented yet. Now, on a more realistic side, we do offer something that fits under the definition of cloud services. And it's, well, the marketing name is IT as a service. Honestly, as an engineer, it's VDI with really good orchestration behind it, or in front of it. So we were trying to sell this as a product or service or combination of both to numerous service providers who were really looking forward to rolling out a cloud service. And most of those efforts stalled or failed. And so in this presentation, you'll see why. That's why I have so much fun with this presentation. So this is what everyone would like to do. So I want to build my cloud, public, private, doesn't matter. And here are 3 easy steps how you do it. I mean, I could turn these 3 easy steps into a white paper. Number 1, you reach the executive decision. So you hire the business consultants and they tell you that you need the cloud service to increase the average revenue per user. And so you go for that. And well, you know, and then you realize there's this small disconnect between what the consultants are telling you and what you're selling today, because you're selling voice minutes. That doesn't sound cloudy. So you delegate to the engineering. Hey guys, we are rolling out this cloud service, and well, it's your job to figure out how we are going to do it. And then, of course, the engineers, being engineers, solve the problem in the usual engineering way. Should we use open source or VMware or Hyper-V, or should we use vCloud Director or OpenStack? And then they do some random combination of these features, find something that actually works in a lab, roll it out and fail, lather, rinse, repeat. And then, eventually, a few years later, you have something that you could reasonably brand as a cloud service. By that time, Amazon is already in a different galaxy. So this is totally wrong. This is not how you build your cloud service. I can't give you a blueprint how to do it right, because if I could, I wouldn't be standing here, I would be selling that. But I can tell you what goes wrong. So the first question that people forget to ask themselves is, what can I reasonably sell? And it has nothing to do with technology. It has all to do with what sales force you have. So if your salespeople are selling voice minutes to small businesses, they will not be able to sell cloud services to enterprises. Because one, they have no clue what that is, and two, no one will listen to them. So the first realistic thing you have to ask yourself, well, not you, your manager's manager's manager, what can we sell? And if what you want to sell is not something that you can sell, then either you scrap the idea or you launch a different company with a different brand. Because if you're known for selling cheap mobile phones, you cannot sell high quality cloud services the next day. It doesn't work. The next thing that everyone forgets is that cloud is more than virtualized servers. So every single service provider that got management advice to increase the average revenue per user, and they want to do cloud services, and they want to copy the most successful one out there. So what will we do? Well, we will be an Amazon clone. That's a great business plan. So there are loads of other things you can do that make more sense because you're not competing with Amazon. I mean, the worst possible business decision you can make is we will compete with Amazon. There are like 5 players that are orders of magnitude bigger than you are, and they cannot compete with Amazon. So why are you any different? So forget infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service makes sense only if you can somehow persuade the customers that this is totally different from Amazon. It can be for, I don't know, regulatory reasons. Maybe the data cannot leave the country. Maybe it's latency. Maybe it's end-to-end control and end-to-end SLA. I don't know, you have to figure it out. But don't just sell virtualized servers, that will not work. On the other hand, there are all sorts of other things that you can try to sell. They are harder to sell because people don't understand them. Platform as a service, for example, well, that was an easy try 3 years ago. Now this space is saturated. You have the cloud foundries and Google App Engines and Azure, and so this is going away as well. Software as a service is a great example if you can position it properly. So BT is making money selling locally hosted copy of Salesforce. Why? Because the data is not leaving the country. They're making money out of that. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The only thing you need is existing enterprise customers with an existing business need that are willing to listen to you. And then you can start getting creative. Storage as a service, disaster recovery centers. I mean, people are not going to use Amazon as a disaster recovery solution because it's too different from their environment. They could use Amazon as a disaster recovery solution if they re-engineer their applications. Yeah, fat chance. That's the last thing they will do. So if you can offer an enterprise customer an environment that is almost identical to what he has in his data center, that's something that could work. And you're not competing with Amazon, you're offering something totally different. Well, under the hood, you're offering the same thing. You're just selling a different thing, okay? And then you have like monitoring as a service, or what we do, IT as a service. So there are all sorts of startups out there that are selling you monitoring services that you can consume through an easy-to-use web interface. We have a customer in South Africa who is using our monitoring tools for their server virtualization cloud services to give their customers the visibility into how the VMs are performing and how the whole cloud is performing. So it's not just that the customers see that their VMs are doing well, they can see that the whole infrastructure is doing well, and they can access that through the web interface. Next question you have to ask yourself: what are your customers willing to buy from you? So even if you have the best sales force to sell this and your brand is wrong, you have a problem. So that ties in with the previous one. Next one, how are you different? Why would someone buy from you and not from Amazon? So we have this company in Slovenia that's offering business-grade cloud services for small businesses, and all they're doing is they're repackaging Google Docs or Google Business Service or whatever it's called. So why would I buy from them if I could get it cheaper from Google directly? What's the added value? Well, hint, there is none in that case. So figure out how you're going to be different. Because if you're not different, no one will buy from you. You cannot be a clone of someone else. You cannot be Amazon clone with Polish user interface. No one will pay for that. Next one, focus on one single thing. The marketing departments hate this. They would love to launch, the whole range of cloud services. Everything from voice as a service, well, mobile phones, to disaster recovery as a service, all at once, available tomorrow. That doesn't work. So pick one thing where you think you're different, you can sell it, and the customers will buy from you, and then go and do it. Obviously, if I'm a big service provider, I don't like this strategy. So, yet again, form smaller teams, treat each team as a startup. It's either do or die for them. That's the only way that you will get anything done. If you try to implement anything cloudy in a traditional incumbent environment, forget it. It doesn't work. The internal processes are just too slow. And 3 years later, you'll have a marketing plan. Next one. This is where we start going into the engineering topics. Will you build or will you buy? One of them is cheaper, or so people think. One of them is taking longer. So if you don't have time, you have to buy. Sorry about that. So if you have a tight schedule, don't even think about OpenStack and KVM beneath it. and ZFS as the file system behind this. Because you will fail, period. In short time frame, the only thing you can do is buy. Buy from a single vendor. So you're not playing the integration game. Okay? If you have time, of course, you should try to build. Because if you can use open source tools, eventually you will save on the licensing costs. But do remember that open source is not free. There's no licensing. But it rarely does exactly what you need it to do. So you have to invest into building. And no one has the slightest idea how lengthy a process that is. So from what we've seen, if people decide to buy, they might get something available in approximately 6 months. If people decide to build, then usually 3 years later they are still building. Because first they have to fail a few times to figure out what doesn't work. So if you have 3 years, yeah, go ahead and build. I don't think you have 3 years. So buy first. And then in the background, while this thing is rolled out and you're getting the first customers and you're getting some market traction, start building the next generation. So that when the next generation is ready, you will have some customers to migrate onto that platform. Otherwise, in 3 years, you'll have a great platform and 0% market share and 0 chance of penetrating the market. And don't forget that, you know, all the technologies that we talk about, that's just boring details. No customer cares about hypervisors or overlay virtual networks or virtual CPUs or PCOIP protocol. The customers care about ease of provisioning. How quickly can I spin up a VM? And I was talking to a large German outsourcing company. They didn't want to call themselves a cloud provider, where it took them weeks to spin up a new customer VM. That was weeks after getting the purchase order in. If you want to build your cloud in with some of the major vendors, and I will not name them, then of course it first takes 6 months to negotiate the contract. And after that, you can start asking them to spin up your VMs. And you may have them ready in a few weeks. So when I asked them, well, why does it take so long? It was like, you know what? It's not that any process would be manual. We have everything automated. But it's done by different teams. So you have to provision the storage, you have to provision the compute, you have to provision the VLAN, you have to provision the firewall, maybe load balancer, remote access into their cloud, backup, and a few other things. Every single one of these takes a few minutes, but it's done by a different team. So there are these queues that each team has, and you serve every request on the FIFO basis. And so the request is sitting in the queue for a few days, and then you spend a few minutes on it, and then it's sitting in the next queue for a few days. So it's all about the orchestration systems. can you integrate all your operations so that the customer himself can click a button and get it done? If you can do that, then you have a cloud service. If you can't do that, then you have server virtualization. And just to give you an example how far you can get, blatant self-promotion. What we do with our IT as a service, when you ask for a new user, we add the user to your local Active Directory. We create a new VM for his desktop. We provision the firewall rules. We provision Cisco Call Manager, so he has a phone number. We have thin apt applications, so we install the applications he needs on his desktop. 15 minutes later, you have a user that can log in and work. So, enough of business and marketing talk. So now you know what we need to do. First, well, I skipped this one. The first question, do you have people in-house that will make this work? Because if the answer to this one is no, then you should continue selling voice minutes. Then you do the market research, then you do the service definition, then you decide on build or buy, and then the first thing you do is you find the orchestration system. You don't start with Hyper-V or VMware or KVM. You start with OpenStack or vCloud Director or BMC, whatever they have, or Cisco's, I forget the name. It's Cloopia, right? No, UCS Director or Manager or something. So, you know, you start with those things. You select one that fits your needs, and then that dictates everything else you will do. It dictates which hypervisor vendor you'll work with. It dictates which hardware you'll use, like it or not. If you go against the wind, if you try to fight against the recommendations, eventually you will succeed. I mean, we always do. But it will be more complex, it will be more expensive, and it will take longer to implement. And now, let's go into technologies. So first, be vendor agnostic. Don't start with, I already have vendor X in-house, so I will look at his system. This is a long-term decision. Your vendor might not be as liked as he is in 5 years. So start with the orchestration system, work your way down, and maybe you'll find out that your vendor fits into that perfectly. Second, don't reuse the old things that are lying around in your network and data center. This is the common approach. Yeah, we need a pilot, so yeah, we have this old pile of crap and we'll use it. Make it work. Totally wrong, because you'll spend time fixing that pile instead of focusing on doing something reasonable. And like I mentioned yesterday morning when I was talking about overlay virtual networks make no sense if you have traditional, hugely oversubscribed data center infrastructure. They work really well if you have non-oversubscribed or not so oversubscribed leaf and spine fabric. So start with that. Start with the architecture that makes sense, like Deutsche Telekom did in Croatia. They didn't reuse the existing routers that were lying around. They deployed a totally new pilot on totally new boxes, architecture, concepts, everything. That's the only way you will save money in the long term. You have to invest first, and then you can get the benefits. Next, standardize, please. I mean, every second vendor is telling you about the beauties of have a multi-vendor approach to whatever. Do you know how much that's costing you? I mean, you can decide to use vendor A for networking and vendor B for storage and vendor C for compute. Fine. But don't use 3 server vendors or 3 vendors of top-of-rack switches. You will lose more money trying to orchestrate those things than you will save because you are playing 2 vendors against each other and you're getting better discounts. Okay? And don't build the first pod with vendor X in this architecture, and then the second pod with vendor Y in a slightly different architecture, and the third pod with vendor Z in a slightly different architecture. That will just result in operations and maintenance nightmare. The only way you can offer cloud services is if you have an architecture that can linearly scale out, that you can replicate. I have one pod, not enough. I add another one which is totally identical. I add another one which is totally identical. Don't reinvent the wheel every time you build something. You're losing time. You're losing energy that could be spent improving your product. And keep it simple. Don't try to be super duper fantastic and introduce all the new technologies if you don't need them. Look at Deutsche Telekom. We will have IPv6 only. We will have simple topology. Well, if the real world doesn't adjust to our topology, we'll adjust the real world. Because of that, we don't need MPLS traffic engineering because there's nothing to engineer. We don't need fast reroute because if you only have 2 paths, LFA would work just fine if I decide to go down that route. So keep things simple. Don't over-engineer things. Remove as much fat as possible. For example, use overlay networks because that reduces your network requirements. If you don't use overlay networks, if you use VLANs, then we can go into all sorts of discussions about spanning tree and trill and SPB and who knows what else. If you go with overlay networks, all you need is IP transport that works with any layer 3 switch from any vendor out there. And it's simple, it's well known, we know how to troubleshoot that because, well, we have been troubleshooting the internet, right? Which starts with this one, be conservative. Don't use new technologies just because they are fancy. We all know that we love to work with new technologies. We also know that they sometimes break. Well, we are quiet about this second part, right? So you will have more than enough on your hands trying to troubleshoot your product and the interaction between different parts as you're trying to integrate them into your product and your orchestration system. Don't make it worse by throwing a mix of new technologies into this. And always focus on business needs. I mean, layer 2 data center interconnect is such a great solution. Well, it's not. Everyone is asking for that. Everyone thinks that that is, the magical pixie dust that will solve everything. And every time I'm faced with that, I ask people, excuse me, what's the business need for this? And I had a really interesting conversation with a customer, and they went like, we need this for disaster recovery. Did you say recovery? Yes, if this data center fails, then we need to restart everything in the other data center. Okay, question number one. If this data center fails, then this subnet is gone, right? Well, actually, yes. So if you create the subnet at that time on the other end, would that be good enough? Well, now that we think about that, yes, thank you. So why do we need stretch subnets if we never use the same subnet in two locations at the same time? Well, it was all because we wanted to have the automatic recovery. So, if this thing fails, everything is restarted automatically on the other end. Sounds cool, right? So I turned to the storage guy. You do have storage replication, right? Of course I do. And I guess you're using LAN-based replication, right? Of course, that's the easiest thing you can do. Okay, now if I understand correctly, the same LAN cannot be active in both data centers. Of course it cannot be. That would be a disaster. Okay. Now this data center fails, and now you need to activate this LAN on this other end before virtual machines can move, right? Of course. I mean, are you stupid? Now, just answer this simple question. Is this switch over automatic or manual? Of course it's manual. You think I'll trust my storage to some automated system? Okay, now the networking guys, you wanted to have everything automated, and you're relying on this storage person, and he has to push the big red button before you can do anything, and you're risking your two data centers with stretch subnets. There's something technically wrong with this picture, but it got worse. So the last thing, I turned to the business guy, asking him, well, now that we know all these details, what exactly are you promising to your customers as the recovery time objective? He goes like, well, that's a good question. No one ever asked me that. I would have to look into our contracts. Okay, just give me a rough guesstimate. Well, I guess it would be 4 hours. So, to recap, to automatically migrate VMs from failed data center to a new data center, which wouldn't work because the storage wouldn't be ready anyway, and we have 4 hours to do it, and you're implementing some crazy new technology to achieve that? There's something wrong. So after this discussion, they all agreed that VMware's Site Recovery Manager would be a good enough solution. And it has hooks where you can tie in your script so that they provision subnets on the other end. Another perfect example is yesterday's Ian's answer to my stupid question. Well, I was trolling him. When I asked him how he plans to do a reroute in 50 milliseconds in his new TerraStream network if he's not using fast reroute. And he went like, I was trying to find a business case that would actually require a 50 millisecond switchover. And guess what? I found none. So 200 milliseconds is good enough for us, and I can easily do that with ISIS. Problem solved. So whenever someone is asking you to implement something that sounds complex, always start asking about the real business needs behind it. And then in the end, you'll figure out usually that there is no business need. It's just someone else trying to solve their problems on your back. And finally, available now is usually better than being perfect in 3 years. The MBA-ish talk for this is minimum viable product. So whatever you can roll out now, roll it out now. Get the first customers, work with them, let them know that this is sort of beta. Google is really good at that. Everything is in beta for years. So let them know that this is, we are working with you on this. We won't charge you for the first 3 months. Help us iron this out. And usually people go for that. Even more, they feel special. They'll help you. You'll have a better product in 3 months because you're working with your users. Well, even more, you will understand what your users are looking for. If you're developing a perfect product in perfect isolation for 3 years, and then you roll it out and you figure out this is not what users need, you have a problem. And finally, partner. If you're doing something totally new, it will be hard for you. Now, if you're Amazon, then obviously you can't partner, because if you're the first one on the planet doing something, there aren't that many people out there who could help you. But if you're not the first on the planet doing something, there are always people out there who did something similar before, learned something, got some experience, and they can help you. Engage them. And finally, remember that this is not something that you will do in the next 2 weeks. I mean, you could have a working prototype in 2 weeks. If you decide to buy and you decide to go with, for example, VMware, you can download all these appliances from their website, you spin up a few servers, and you have a working prototype in a few weeks. Getting there from there into production is a long way. Scaling that is even harder. So don't wait. You don't have time to wait because other people are already doing something. So you have to start now. And as always, when you get questions afterwards thinking about this, I'm always available either on Twitter or on email. So just send me a question and I usually try to reply as soon as possible. And if I don't, it's not because I hate you, but because I got a burst of mail and your email just rolled, off the screen. So resend. Thank you.